I am Jordan Luebkemann. I'm an attorney with Earthjustice in the Florida Regional Office, working out of Tallahassee and working mostly on energy issues in Florida and Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Jordan, for being here. And Jordan, I don't want to steal too much about the subject matter, but it's energy efficiency. And above all else, it really is an equity issue because people are getting more efficient in their homes, people who are affluent all the time. Every 5 years, we set conservation goals. I myself was involved in the 2009 conservation goal setting, 2014, and again in the 2018, 2019. So we'll be bringing everybody up to date, but Florida is woefully behind and is just really, really inexcusable. TECO's 46, Duca's 48, and FPL is 51 out of 52 in offering efficiency programs. And Jordan's going to get into all the whys that's is. So it's fun being in the foxhole with you, Jordan. And tonight we're really here to enlist health voices because there's a real direct link between efficiency and a whole range of related issues. So Jordan, with that, just launch in.
Great. Thank you so much for that intro, Susan. And if you'll all bear with me while I try to get my slides to work. All right. Do you have mine or yours?
No, it looks good. We got you.
Okay, excellent. So I was told to plan to talk for about 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to keep this as broad as will give a good background on this general subject, and then really move into the conversation side so that we can have a conversation that's really targeted at everyone's interests in what you would like to get out of this. So in general, we're going to be talking about energy efficiency in Florida and how we can make it less abysmal. As Susan mentioned, it's really bad. Florida is 46th in the nation, the last report that had come out among energy efficiency, compared to all of the other states. And this preceding FCCA is the one thing that kept us from dropping to 50th when it last came up in 2019. So first, like I said, I'm going to give an overview. I don't know what everyone's relative levels of understanding about all these things are, so I'm just going to kind of touch on some basics. Please sound off if it's already information that you have. But why energy efficiency in the first place? This slide is really trying to get at. I was looking for a family eating in the dark, because that's what I picture is electricity shutoffs, the high energy burden that we have in this state. Just families are not able to keep up with the rising costs of electricity, particularly when we also know that the temperature is increasing each year, meaning that our Florida summers are becoming harder and harder to cool your homes during. Obviously, this is both a financial burden and impact on families, but this also has tremendous effects for health, because we see instances where households are choosing between paying an electricity bill to keep their house comfortable and actually buying food or buying medicines. So there's tremendous health impacts there. The other thing, though, is that when we talk about energy efficiency, it's also the very cheapest way to use less electricity. Obviously, the cheapest kilowatt hour is the one that you don't use. And so the climate and the other health impacts that flow from that are obviously manifold, because one, we're running power plants less if we're not needing that electricity. And that both has the knock-on climate effects, as well as all of the emissions that aren't coming out of a stack, since we know that, again, these tend to be incredibly concentrated in areas where people are already very overburdened by environmental pollution and by other systemic factors that already put their health at a higher risk. So now moving more to the regulatory side, how does energy efficiency work or not work in Florida? As you probably have at least some passing knowledge, we live in a state with regulated monopoly utilities. Generally speaking, there are some municipal ones, but about 90% of Floridians get their power from a regulated IOU, or investor-owned utility. Most people on this call, that's going to be Florida Power and Light, FPL, or TECO or Duke, depending on where you are. And so all three of those utilities, as well as a couple of the largest municipal utilities, are subject to regulation by the Florida Public Service Commission for energy efficiency every 5 years in a proceeding called FCCA. And this is sort of a snapshot of FCCA as it has worked in Florida. FCCA is the Florida Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, and it requires the utilities to come before the commission and set goals every 5 years. These goals become mandatory. So they set goals by studying the total technical potential of energy efficiency that could be achieved in the state, which already takes into account, as Susan mentioned, people are getting more efficient all the time. This is kind of in the weeds, but it bakes in that codes and standards are getting more strict and that people are voluntarily buying their own efficient devices. And it really looks at what is the universe of total energy efficiency savings that are out there at all. And then it overlays onto that what's economically possible, and then what is actually achievable in that 5-year time period. And that then becomes the binding goals on the utilities. They're given 90 days to come up with programs that they will implement over that next 5-year period to increase energy efficiency in the state. Now, I mentioned that the goals are mandatory, but last time FPL literally proposed goals of 0. And some of the other utilities came very close. Their argument there was, well, we'll come up with the goal. The goal, it's mandatory that we meet this goal, but of course, we don't really think much of energy efficiency for a variety of reasons that don't really hold up to any scrutiny. And so they actually proposed to eliminate their energy efficiency programs. So SACE, the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, which is where this data is from, and where Susan has dedicated many hours of her life. We represented them, and the League of United Latin American Citizens of Florida and EcoSwift in that proceeding, Earthjustice did, pushing back on that and saying, no, 0 is not actually a number. Don't have to have a semantic argument about that, but in the spirit of the law, right, 0 is not a number. And the commission did ultimately go along with that and allowed some very weak goals to come out of that proceeding. But as you can see, the latest numbers available in 2020 really didn't do that much. Florida is still woefully behind where it should be. As a context here, what we're looking at in this graph is the total energy saved as a percentage of all annual retail sales. The US average is about 0.72%, so a little over 8 times what Florida did in 2020. The Southeast is really far behind, and Florida is really far behind even among our peers in the Southeast. And that's because we've got companies like FPL that fight vehemently to have to shut down any kind of energy efficiency, because if you're FPL, if you're a regulated monopoly utility with a lot of power in the legislature, and you're in the business of selling electrons, then energy efficiency isn't great for your business model. And so to really dig into why this is such a Sisyphean task to get energy efficiency at the Florida Public Service Commission, there's 2 really big problems with how FCCA has worked. And that's the rate impact measure test, or RIM, and the 2-year payback screen. Now, it's a little in the weeds, but it is really important to understand, because we can all write in a letter that says, you need to increase energy efficiency. But the argument from the other side is the utilities will say we've done as much as is cost effective and as makes sense for customers. And if you were to do any more spending on energy efficiency, which is not free, it will actually be penalizing customers. So the rate impact measure test is how FPL and the other Florida utilities, which fall in line behind FPL, like to do their cost benefit analysis. Under this proceeding, you do have to have an analysis of cost and benefits, because obviously you could buy a brand new air conditioner for everyone in the state and save a lot of money on power, but you would have just spent much more money on getting those new HVAC systems. So there is a trade-off, and there is an appropriate level that can be determined for how much savings is really helping people before just spending money on the latest tech. And so cost benefit analysis is fine. Problem with the rate impact measure test, though, is that it specifically treats the utility's lost revenues as a cost. I'll run that back because it's wild. This is a cost benefit analysis in a test that is trying to figure out how to have more energy efficiency, and it treats the very success of that energy efficiency as a cost. So under the RIM test, basically nothing passes that economic screening, unless in very specific instances it has to do with saving electricity at the very highest peak hours, when it's actually more expensive for the utility to run that electricity than to not. Generally speaking, they want to move more electrons at peak hours when they have to turn on extra peaker plants. It's less economic for them. And so that's the only time that the utilities are really ever interested in efficiency, because otherwise it's just lost revenue to them. And that's what this test captures. The other big thing is the 2-year payback screen, which basically is designed to screen out what they would call free ridership. The idea being energy efficiency programs are designed to capture energy efficiency that would not happen otherwise. There needs to be some sort of additionality. And so we can't just go around handing out the nicest, newest, efficient appliances to people that were already going to buy them, because that's not helping us. It's not getting anything additional. And now those people that were already going to buy the fancy, water and heat saving dishwasher are getting a free ride on the backs of the rest of their fellow customers for that utility. Again, the idea of taking into consideration free ridership is one that has some merit. However, the way that the utilities do this at the commission has no merit, and that is this 2-year payback screen, whereby the logic is any measure, and a measure in FCCA is any specific action or implement. It could be a solar water blanket, it could be a faucet aerator, any device or a piece of technology, upgrading the SEER level on your air conditioning unit, adding insulation, right? Any measure that will pay for itself in terms of the cost of the energy savings within 2 years is automatically screened out from consideration. So yeah, I see you smiling, and it is ridiculous, because that's where all of the best efficiency is. Incandescent light bulbs are so bad that if you put a new one in today, it is still worth it to throw it away and replace it with an LED. The savings and efficiency are that great. It pays for itself relatively quickly. However, there are a lot of things that pay for themselves not as quickly as a light bulb, but still well within 2 years. And even when it comes to light bulbs, again, going back to those early slides about why energy efficiency, the people that most need this tool for being able to afford their bills, to cool their houses so that they're not putting their families or children themselves at elevated medical risk, these folks don't typically have stacks of cash sitting around earmarked to buy LED light bulbs or put extra insulation on their house. A lot of people are living in rental housing, where there's zero incentive for a landlord to invest in energy efficiency implements for the tenants that live there that are constantly moving in and out. And so the 2-year payback screen, with surgical precision, I would say, eliminates all of the best opportunities to truly make people's lives better. The most cost-effective energy efficiency measures that would really make bills more affordable for a lot of Floridians without costing a lot of money, and therefore getting into some of the nefarious cross-subsidization concerns that would be raised if you were, for instance, handing out entire new HVAC systems to everybody. So after the dumpster fire that was the last round of FCCA, everyone kind of threw their hands up And ultimately, commission staff decided that the rule that governs FCCA, which is 30 years old now, could possibly use a renovation. And so a lot of hemming and hawing went in. There have been several commission workshops, and ultimately what resulted was a rule from staff that did not get rid of the 2-year payback screen, that did not get rid of the rim test, and in fact made things worse by proposing this cyclical version of setting goals whereby the utilities would propose their programs and then the goals would be derived from their programs rather than studying what is actually possible and forcing the utilities to make goals for that. The utilities would just say, we think we'll do this much, and that's therefore what our goal should be. Fortunately, after a lot of comments from the energy and equity community, that was beat back. And now we are waiting for staff's final version of the rule. Based on public records requests that have been done recently, it looks like the plan is just to do nothing, with some minor tweaks to the language. The final rule that staff is preparing to finalize, we expect in the next couple of weeks, would not touch the 2-year payback screen or the rim test, which, as I said, is the thing that is most preventing Florida from catching up to anybody who's doing a good job with energy efficiency. So brings us more or less to the end of this little presentation, but I want to leave it with a sort of call to action. So what can be done? On September 27th, the commission is going to have another workshop. It's on the docket, but it hasn't really been scheduled in the calendar yet, so I can't point you to a place where you can sign up to watch that. But a thing that could be very helpful is to fill the docket with comments from folks that are concerned about this and would like to see something done differently. The reason that I bored you all to tears going into such depth with the 2-year payback screen and the rim test is that it's not enough just to say that we need more energy efficiency. We really need to attack those specific features which are preventing us from getting more energy efficiency. And so if anyone feels moved to write to the commission, sending an email to the clerk there as on the screen mentioning this docket and this rule, that would be great. And if